Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. I'm going to try something new with you today because I got a question from one of my customers, Oran, who sent me a link to Chad Blake and Andrew Scheps talking about acoustics. And he was wondering what to think about this approach, and he can't decide if it's any good. And so I thought it might be fun to do one of those react videos. I'm sure you've seen them around on YouTube where people just react to other people's videos. They're kind of stupid, but also kind of fun. And so I thought I'd do an acoustician reacts video to these pro mixers talking about studio acoustics. But before I get into that, real quick, if you're looking at bass traps for your room, if you're thinking of buying some, if you're thinking of building your own, you may be a bit confused about what you're looking at, which way to go, what the right bass trap for your room is, then I want you to download my free complete guide to bass traps and bass trapping at the link in the description. I've basically compiled a list of all the different types of bass traps out there, both the ones that you can buy and the ones that you can build yourself, going for obviously from simple porous absorber traps through resonance traps, membrane traps, Helmholtz resonators, active traps, combined traps, VPRs, in German Verbundplattenresonatoren. These are basically when you got a steel sheet on top of some insulation material. They're all in there, and I've sorted them and kind of listed them, prioritized them in a way for you to understand what it is you're actually looking at, how they work, how to use them in your room, where to put them, how many you need, ultimately for you to figure out what the right bass trap for your room, what the right solution to get control of the low end in your studio is. So if that's for you, if you want to figure out what kind of bass trap to get for your room, I want you to download my complete guide to bass traps and bass trapping at the link in the description. But with that, let's jump into this video and let's see what we get.
How about room acoustics? How important are your room acoustics for mixing, if you're not mixing on headphones?
Well, that's the cool thing about headphones. You're wearing your studio on your head. So,
do you want to talk about room ambiance? Ambiance, maybe?
For me,
let me just jump in right there, just because obviously he just mentioned that he kind of carries around his studio in his headphones, and there's definitely some truth to that, as in there are people who work primarily on headphones, and with the right headphones, if you know them very well, you can totally do that. So a good pair of headphones, I think, should be part of your kind of speaker, your feedback system that you use to listen to music, to work on your music. So I think that's totally legit, and I couldn't agree more.
I think the deader the better. I want to hear my speakers. I don't want to hear the room when I'm mixing, no matter what I'm doing.
I've always liked dead rooms, like style, carpet on the back and all.
Yeah, a living room.
Let me jump in again here, because again, I think he's onto something. I think what he really wants to say, or what he did say, is that he wants to listen to his speakers, not his room, right? And he uses the word dead, which I don't really like when we're talking about having a room that is properly controlled. I prefer the term dry, because dead is kind of has this negative meaning to it, and usually we're talking about kind of overdamped rooms, or rooms that are overdamped in the high end when we're talking about dead rooms. I don't like dead sounding rooms. I don't really know anybody who likes dead sounding rooms, but you do need a very dry room, because what that means is that the impact of the room on the speakers is reduced to an absolute minimum. And I think this is necessary. This isn't just kind of a preference. This is necessary, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the room feels dead just because it's dry. Dry just means very, very short reverb times, very well controlled reflections, so that the impact on the sound from the speakers is minimum. But you can still have a room that feels lively while being very dry, because that sense of dryness, or rather that sense of liveliness, is both a function of reverb time, but also of reflections coming back to your ear, and not specular reflections, so not reflections that actually cause damage to the direct sound, but broken up reflections, right? That's why I have all these slats on my absorbers, because they give back some sense of liveliness to the room while not actually messing with the sound from the speakers. Yeah, but I think he's spot on saying he prefers a dead room. He prefers a room that is controlled, where the effect the room has on the speakers is reduced to a minimum.
With a bunch of furniture in it is like the perfect mix room to me.
Yeah, my studio doesn't have any special treatment by a professional. I'm certainly not a professional for that. I just put up some half rounds above me, so it helps dissipate like high frequencies, because I have hard surfaces up there. I'm also turned at an angle in the room, which is kind of weird, but it's the only way I can do it. A lot of rugs on the floor, and then stuff on the walls, but you know, not any treatment, just things hanging. Anything will do. So, but I really only spent a day doing it, and then it didn't sound great, but I've just learned the room.
You know, what that tells us is that these guys are professionals, right? They are very, very experienced, very skilled audio engineers, mixers. Yeah, and that's the thing with acoustics, right? I mean, it's just a force multiplier that helps you do, or helps you do the job that you intend to do, right? Mixing, audio work, translation in particular, is a skill, and the room is just a tool to get you there. And the kind of the better the room sounds, or the better the room is, the less the impact of the room is on the sound from your speakers, the easier it will be to judge what the speakers are actually playing. Yeah, but at this level with these guys, they're so skilled, they don't need a super decked out room. It's just not necessary for them. Yeah, they know how to work with sound. They have so much experience knowing, understanding what sound, how sound is composed, that they can work around any deficiencies that the room has, or that the room imparts on the sound from the speakers. Yeah, so that's what we're seeing here. It's just two guys that don't really care much about acoustics, which is fair enough. Yeah, they don't need it. Yeah, so they make their rooms work for them because they are skilled enough to understand intuitively what they need to do in order to get the results they want.
I didn't want to. I spent money. I've done it. I've done that. I've spent 15 grand having somebody do a room, and it didn't sound as good as what I can do. So.
It's also a good.
So he says he spent 15 grand, which is interesting. Like, in the grand scheme of things, spending 15 grand on the acoustics in your room isn't all that much, especially when you're talking about a pro studio. That's kind of, I would classify that as kind of ambitious DIY level. Yeah, but at that scale, we're not talking super professional high-end rooms yet, interestingly enough. Yeah, so although if you get the right help from somebody who knows what they're doing, I think for 15 grand you can do quite a bit, and he shouldn't have gotten a room that he didn't like. That's not what should have happened. Yeah, so unfortunate for him. I don't know who he worked with there. I don't know what they did exactly, but yeah, just to kind of put that in context.
Good side effect of only using one pair of speakers. I think for both of us, we know exactly what the speakers are supposed to sound like. So when you have to move them somewhere else, you know the problem is the room. So you almost intuitively start fixing the room by moving around until it sounds like your speakers again, and then you just work.
This is exactly what I was saying before, right? They have such an intuitive understanding of how their speakers should sound that they can make adjustments to their setup, to their room, until the point that they've reached the point where it sounds like what they would expect, and then it does actually give them what they need. Yeah. He also mentioned something interesting, which I've mentioned in a previous video, is that he only works with one pair of speakers, with one main pair. Yeah, and I think this is pretty important, especially when you're starting out. It's much more effective to focus on one pair and make sure you're getting everything out of that one pair, and not trying to work around that by adding a second or even a third pair, especially of the same type, right? It doesn't really make sense, in my opinion, to add another pair of two-way speakers to your room if you've already got one, yeah, because it's not going to tell you much or anything different or anything beyond what your existing pair already tells you. Yeah, if you plan to add more speakers to your room, different speaker systems, but different split playback systems, it makes much more sense to then use a very different type of speaker system, right? And the first place to start when you've already got one main pair of two-way or maybe even three-way speakers is to add maybe just a mono single driver speaker to that, because that you can set up somewhere kind of to the side, maybe you kind of right in the center in front of you, but that basically gives you a very different insight into the music than your main pair. Yeah, you could also add like a hi-fi system, yeah, or a boombox or something like that, but a very different system that actually gives you an insight into the music that is very different to what your main system is doing. And the usual way, or the kind of the first step there, is to think about how do you restrict the sound in a way that it focuses on a certain aspect, right? These little mono speakers with one driver work so well together with your main pair because they remove low end and they remove high end and only make you focus on the mids, which is where the mix lives, where the music lives, where the balance is, where the balance between the different layers in your mix shows itself the strongest. And that will give you an insight that is much greater and that is much more useful than adding just a second pair of two-way speakers.
You know, there's always some sort of, you know, it's not usually 100% comfortable. You just got to learn your environment a bit. Yeah. It's just doing it a lot. You know, we've mixed so many hundreds and hundreds. I think it's in thousands yet?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, why not say that?
Thousands.
Thousands of songs. Thousands of mixes. Well, mixes, yes.
One mix, yes.
Yeah, thousands. And that's the only way you really learn, except coming to mix with the masters and seeing the process. You'll learn a lot of that stuff. And so many things will, like, some of the questions won't be relevant anymore. It's really about flow and watching how somebody approaches the work, not necessarily what they use. Yeah? That's why this is such a worthwhile thing. Here's a question here.
So maybe let's leave it at that. I think he rounded that off very nicely. Yeah, like I said before, it's about the skill of the creative work, and the room, the acoustics, is just a tool that enables you to do that, to learn that skill, to improve that skill, to master that skill, hopefully. Yeah. So I think that he summed it up very nicely. Cool. I hope you liked this format. Let me know if you want me to do these again. And with that, let's keep learning to trust our ears and get back to having fun working in the studio. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.